Alright, I drew my new line and my marker is like running and dripping all over the place for some reason. But time to get chopping. Yeah, a little bit something like that. So I still haven't haven't done the floor yet, but oh my goodness. This is actually the driver's seat out of the Sunfire. I've got it on the passenger side of this project. We don't need seatbelts where we're going, boys. No, I'm just joking. I'll probably put some seatbelts in it later. This Jeep roll cage is actually pretty easy to attach seatbelts to. Okay, so there's a friggin' wire attached to that. Probably won't need that bolt, but I'll save it anyway. They didn't have that on the passenger seat. The passenger seat belt was bolted to the floor in the car, but I've got the passenger seat over there, so that might be a little bit confusing. But everything fits so much better this way. So, because there's the adjuster that you adjust your seat with here, it causes interference over here. And everything works fine. Like, it might be on the inside instead of the outside, but it'll still work fine. It'll still be there. And yeah, I have a good idea for a floor. I haven't made my final decision yet on the floorboard. The back seat is going to be really tight. Well, I think it's safe to say this back bar here, that's as far as the back seat can go, or the back of the back seat. So the back seat is probably going to be tight for foot room or leg room. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure if I'll use the same seats. I'd like to use 4 of the same seats, but the back seat might be cramped. Oh, I'm way up here above the roll cage, climbing on the jungle gym, trying to get the shot. And there's back here behind this bar, from the bar to the rear bumper. Ooh, this bar here will be, that's as far as the back seat can go. And then from there back is going to be a little tiny truck box or utility box, storage box, pickup truck box, I don't know. This is the redneck Razor that I built last year. The difference between the Razor and the Ranger is the Razor is a buggy and the Ranger is a truck. So this is the buggy that I built last year. I built the truck for pretty much $0 from junk. The only thing I sunk money into was a cheap winch. A cheap winch on it. I think I bought the fog lights too. But I got this truck for scrap price, which is about $300, and then I sold it had a black soft top on it, a nice black soft top, and I sold that for $300, which pretty much paid for the whole project. But this one is 4-wheel drive, and I didn't build it from scratch. I just took a vehicle that was submerged underwater and changed the computer and flushed all the fluids. The engine was hydro-locked. It came from the scrap yard. So I flushed all the fluids and took out the spark plugs, got it on hydrolock, changed the computer, then I did all the suspension and tires myself. Can't see. Skid plate I did myself. That's an aluminum skid plate off Chevy truck. And I'm going to be using it today because I need to go and get a heavy oil tank from the back, and I'll probably use this to either carry it or tow it. So I'm going to fire up this friggin' thing today. She's muddy. She's friggin' muddy, boys. The mud truck's muddy. Who would have thought? Who would have thought the mud truck was muddy? Oh my goodness. Oh, the battery's still alive. That's good. Haven't used this thing in weeks. Alright guys, I went and took the redneck razor down and brought back something that hopefully I can use. So this is an old furnace oil tank, and if you've seen my DIY ATV trailer episode video, you'll see I made a trailer out of one of these, a tag-along trailer to tow behind an ATV or UTV. So when I made the trailer, I cut one side out of it, and it's pretty good steel. It's pretty good heavy gauge, and most of the time this stuff is in good shape still. Good. So I got a pretty big slab of sheet metal. It's actually good gauge sheet metal, but pretty good slab here, so I'm hoping I can make some floorboards out of it. Maybe 1 or 2 pieces. So I'm going to have to measure it and check the width and the length and see how much floor I can get out of it. I'll try to avoid the curves because I just want flat steel. I'm sure it could be straightened, but we'll see how I can make it work. I'm working with what I got here, and I'm really going to milk it because I'm trying to get a piece that's 42 inches wide so I can get a longer strip, because I'm going to need a longer strip for the back. But that means that my sheet's not going to be flat. It's going to have the sides, like along the frame rails, are going to be curled. So I might have to straighten that out a little bit. Maybe after I cut the line, maybe the steel will naturally pop out a bit. But I might have to straighten the edges a little because I'm trying to get so much material. Sounds like the helicopter landed nearby. I can hear sirens. Probably an accident on the highway. Oh, frig. Most time-consuming part is probably marking it out and squaring it out. I'm not sure. So that's the slab I got to work with. Well, I made some initial incisions. So I cut that leg. I just made one cut in it like that. This is very similar to what I did on the ATV trailer. Very similar. So there's a weld here and a weld here, but if you can cut it, they'll pretty much hinge on the welds. The welds might even break. So if I push down on this leg here, that'll open up. Ugh. Now that part's not going to be any interference. I don't think, because the sheet I need is up here. So when I cut this floorboard out, or whatever, this sheet of steel, the only piece I'll have to remove is this top piece, depending on how I mount it. If I flip it upside down and have that pointed down, you might not ever notice it, but I will trim it off anyway. So I might have to trim one weld, unless I can put the vice grips on that and break the weld off and grind it smooth or something. This one seems like the welds are pretty strong. So now I can either finish the cuts with the cutoff wheel, or I can put the reciprocating saw in there and just do it with a Sawzall. I've made initial incisions all the way around, or one on each straight edge, just in case I decide to do it with the Sawzall. I like the Sawzall better because it doesn't make sparks, and it doesn't put aluminum oxide in the air. So I don't need a mask when I'm using the Sawzall, but it doesn't cut as straight, not quite as straight as the cutoff wheel. Should call that one Maxwell House. Pretty much good to the last drop. She's time for a new cutoff wheel, big time. Well, I'm glad I had my guard on and my safety goggles, because I made a new cut here, and there must have been pressure on this corner here, but when I made my cut and when it hooked up with the other cut, man, just kerbang! I think it pinched the disc. And she was turning, I don't know how many thousand RPM she was turning at. And that disc just took a chunk right out of her. And then it goes all out of balance after that. I'm super glad I had the guard on, because I've seen shit like that happen, and the chunk that flies off might end up right in your friggin' skull or something. I think it went down inside the tank, because I was running the grinder like this, down in the groove there with the guard up towards me, and when this line met up with that line, I don't know why, but I decided to start down here and work my way up there. And when they met, wow, it was a kerbang. I think it's right there where that mark was, or somewhere here. Oh, there's the chunk of the disc, I think. I probably have to turn on my flash. Rig. That's a waste of a... I just put that disc on not too long ago. I only used it for maybe a couple minutes. I've been through a lot of discs. I've done a lot of cutting in my day, but I've never had that happen before. Frig, boys, having deja vu. 13,300 RPM. Let's take this friggin' label off. Deja vu. I feel like I've done this before. Alright, take 2 and action. Well, I got both sides cut, and I used the reciprocating saw for these sides here, because it's only a single ply, and the single ply, the reciprocating saw goes through it pretty easy. Clearly, the reciprocating saw, like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't cut quite as straight. It's kind of like a jigsaw, almost a giant jigsaw, so it's a little bit harder to keep it straight. But these ends here I did with the cutoff wheel, and they're so much more straight. But when you're using this cutoff wheel, you get aluminum oxide and sparks. So you see all these little black particles? That comes off the cutting wheel and goes in your lungs. So I don't really like to use these unless I absolutely have to. See this stuff here? That's all aluminum oxide. That's all shit that you don't want in your lungs. So as much as I prefer to use the reciprocating saw because there's no sparks and no aluminum oxide dust, I can't use the reciprocating saw on these ends because they're 2-ply or a double ply. Focus. See the 2-ply there? That's where they come together and they're welded together. It should only be a single ply when I'm done cutting though, because the double ply is welded out here and I'm cutting inside of the weld. So I should only get a single ply when I'm done. So where I'm at right now is I got this side done, well, both of these sides done, and the 2-ply ends, I got this side is pretty much done. I was almost done when that wheel broke. The cutoff wheel broke right there. I can see the chunk of it. I can see the chunk of it in there. So I'm almost done this cut, and then I just got to do this side. This side's not done at all. Frig boys, she's starting to rain again. Oh, sounds like thunder. But that's okay because all the aluminum oxide dust from the cutoff wheel is like inside of the tank. So the tank is full of dust, like airborne dust floating around. And when I made the last cut, I think I got all the cuts done now, but when I made the last cut, there was like a poof of aluminum oxide dust that came out of that tank. But I was doing a lot of grinding, so the rain is probably going to help with that. It's probably going to, the humidity and moisture will probably keep the dust down. So I'm just going to wait for the dust to settle down. And in the meantime, I think I should unbolt the cage, and it's going to be pretty simple because there's one bolt here, and that's all. I don't have the gussets on yet, so yeah, I was pretty much waiting for all that stuff because to put the floor on, and that's what I'm going to do now. So if I'm going to put the floor on the frame, look, the section that I cut is the back section. Look at all the mess I'm making. Frig, I better clean some of this shit up. Anyway, the section that I cut is the back section because the panel or the tank is not big enough to cover the whole 7 feet. Like the frame from this corner to the back bumper is 7 feet, and that tank's only 5 feet long. Even if I make the most out of it and use the round edges like I am, it's still not long enough, even if I use it lengthwise. So I'm going to have this cross member here, there's going to be like an overlap, or there's going to be a union or joint here. So the floor is going to be in 2 sections. There's going to be the front section, and then there's going to be the rear section. And the rear section is going to be quite long. I think it's going to be about 57, 58 inches long, all the way to the back bumper or to the rear frame rails. So I guess I'm doing the rear floor first. I would rather I'd rather do the front first and get the controls going, and if I was itchy enough to drive this thing or whatever, or if I was itching to drive it. But I'm just working with what I got, and the piece that I got is big enough to do the whole rear, and yeah, that's what I need. Well, it's the perfect size for the rear, so there's no point in chopping it up if it'll fit really good back here when I can use smaller pieces, or I could use a smaller piece up here. I got that second ply piece off. One thing about using old recycled junk or recuperated salvaged materials, they might be cheap, but you always got to work with them. You always got to prep them and cut them, and time is money also. So you might save money on these materials, but you got to spend time on them. So I clamped the vice grips on there, just as I suspected. That is really stiff. Like, it is really hard to bend or break. And if it's welded really good, which I'm afraid it is, I'll probably just bend the floorboard rather than snap the weld. So clearly it's not going to break off, so I need to grind the weld. Holy frig, I really need to clean up this friggin' mess. Anywho, I got the floorboard here. I keep thinking I need to do more prep to it, and I just realized I had never finished taking this side off. Took the other side off. This is that 2-ply shit I was telling you about. I should be wearing gloves. I bought those Mastercraft gloves. Master crap. Garbage. Garbage. Gloves are getting expensive for good ones nowadays. And the ones they sell you nowadays, see if I can find them. You're more likely to hurt yourself than look at these. I've only worn these gloves like probably less than 7 days, not even. On the first day, I was grinding, and the sparks and stuff were like burning holes. So they're like a leather glove, like a good work glove, that won't happen. You won't burn holes in, like, let's say the leather hide or whatever. So it was burning holes in this top piece. I think these are nitrile coated Master crap, and they are crap. So there's nitrile coating here, which is supposed to be good for non-slip and stuff with oil and whatnot, like greasy stuff. But I tell you, these gloves are junk, absolutely junk. They fill up with like the aluminum oxide off the cutting wheel. They fill up with junk like that. They're more dirty on the inside than they are on the outside, I think. And I paid like $8 or $10 for these gloves. Never again. Never again. These are junk. I don't complain about stuff very often, but let me tell you, boys, don't waste your fucking money on that. Do not. They might be cheap to buy them up front, but 2 pairs of those would be $20, and they wouldn't last. 2 pairs of those wouldn't last half as long as a good pair of $20 gloves. So I guess I learned my lesson there. You get what you pay for. You buy cheap shit, you get cheap shit, and it's just that simple. Quality is a thing of the past. Stuff used to be made of quality, and companies used to be proud of quality. But nowadays, they just pimp everything out, cheap as possible, as fast as possible, max profit, max production, and they don't give a shit about the quality that you get anymore. Alright, so that I'm gonna have to put either the grinder or the vice grips on this. I already did the other side, but for some reason I forgot this side. And then I don't think there's much prep to do, but it's gonna be the floor. I got the back of the cage unbolted there, I got the bolts out, so it's just sitting there. And these edges are a little bit rolled, they're a little bit round on these edges. So I might have to prep that and straighten it out a little bit. Well, I don't know. I think I've got it pretty much prepped. I could probably do a lot more prep if I wanted to go around the edges and file them down a little bit or whatever. Or grind off some of those welds a little better. But for now, my neighbor's coming over. And he's going to give me a hand. Wacky Willie's coming over. And he's going to help me set that sheet. We're going to have to lift up the back of the cage. I've got the back of the cage unbolted, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Have to lift up the back of the cage and slide it in from behind, I'm guessing. Or either in from the side or in from behind. I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself here, but I'm just looking for something to do, keep on trucking, so yeah. Well, we got that sheet put on there, and Wacky Willie helped me put it on there, and I put the cage up on a jack stand. The front two bolts are in there, but they're just loose. So I got all these other back ones out. But there's still a bit of a curve. Well, for now, it's probably going to bounce back a little bit because I didn't really unkink it or uncurl it. But for now, I just put a shitload of weight on there, and hopefully that'll weigh her down. And I got the edges sitting up on the frame. The edges are sitting up on the frame rail. So, and I got the weight. Most of the curl is right here. So the high spot is like pretty much in the apex, or the apex of the bend is around here somewhere. So I put a lot of weight there, some big steel plates, and some heavy old batteries. So I'm just gonna let it sit overnight probably. This reminds me of the boat build, or the plywood boat project, because I did that on the plywood boat project. I put some weight on it, and when I curved the bottom of the boat, that's how I did it. But that was plywood, and this is steel. So I'm guessing that this is going to bounce back a little bit. Well, I got the cage all unbolted completely. Completely unbolted the cage. It's just floating right now. Floating and propped up on the front tires here. So that gives me access to work on the floor. And like I mentioned earlier, these holes that hold the cage down, I'll probably use those to initially fasten the floor. So I'm going to line up the floor right now. I was going to I was going to overlap on this cross member here, and because my front section, I didn't have enough steel to do the front section. Well, I do, I just have to do it in pieces. But this is going to be underneath of the seats anyway. Like, the seats are going to be over top of this cross member, so you probably won't, if there is an overlap or a joint, you probably won't notice it. It was going to be directly on that cross member, so I'd have something nice and sturdy to attach to. And it'll still be there. It'll still be attached there, but see, this piece here sticks up a little bit high, and that's where my rear bumper is going to go, or my trailer hitch or whatever. And there's a couple holes in there, but since it sticks up a little bit, I was going to trim it down, and I was going to have the access hang out to make like a longer box, because the box is going to be really short, like from the center of the tire or the axle back. So the box is going to be quite short. However, if I tuck the floorboard on top of the frame and inside of there, it'll be a little more flush. It won't stick out. It'll be more sturdy on the ass end here, because if I have the sheet sticking out, it might be a little flimsy, which I may or may not be able to attach to my bumper anyway. Or if my bumper sticks out, that might help increase capacity. I don't know. But I changed my mind a little bit there, so I decided not to trim that off, or not to let it hang out. I do want to have more cargo capacity, but I don't really want the sheet metal hanging out beyond the frame. Well, took the whole cage off completely. I feel like I'm back at square one, square two, square three, square four. I feel like I took a couple steps back in time. But it's pretty easy to take the cage off. The hardest part was actually just getting it out of the way, especially by myself. I had it sitting ahead of the front bolts here, and I took the whole cage and I just teetered it forward, and I had it leaning, and had some poles on the front tires just supporting it there. And then I was hammering away here and forgot about it, and the whole friggin' cage just fell over. So, yeah, the cage is completely out of my way now. Zero Fox, get her done. So, I went ahead and I flipped the floor upside down, so the painted part is downwards. And it actually has like 2 coats of paint. It has the factory enamel on it, plus it was painted like light blue. So there's 2 coats of paint protecting the bottom side, which is good. And hopefully that'll, you know, keep the rust off and stuff. At least it's coated and sealed, the bottom side. And it fits better too this way, because I was mentioning earlier how these cross members they're a little bit lower than the top of the frame rail, and that there was a bit of a bow in it, in this sheet that I cut out of the tank. So flipping it upside down seems to be a little bit better fit, because the way it bows, it sits flat on the frame and comes up a little bit, which is great, and I can still clamp it and bolt it down here. And I've noticed that it's sitting pretty tight where I have it fastened. I don't have it fastened everywhere right now, but where I have it fastened, it sits nice, and it also sits on the cross members also, which is great, friggin' great. So I don't need any spacers underneath or anything like that. I might tack weld it or bolt it to the odd cross member in the odd spot. But I've got a good sheet of steel here now on the floor. It's pretty big, but it's not big enough to do the whole floor. But it's definitely going to cover the whole box and the whole back seat. Well, I just took a little break, friggin' break times, and I was thinking, should I put the cage back on because there's enough room here? I do believe, even if not, I could always unbolt this and lift the front of the cage up again to put the rest of the floor on. So I was thinking, should I put the cage back on? Should I put the front floor on? Have to chop up some more. The tank that I used to get this slab from is oil furnace, or furnace oil tank. Sorry. There's still more material to it. There's a lot of material left in it. But I was considering keeping it the way it is, because when I cut this side out, it makes a nice box, like similar to the ATV trailer I made. If you haven't seen that episode, maybe check it out. But I can either I can finish chopping that tank up to get the rest of my floor out, or I can possibly find another tank so I don't ruin what's left of that tank. But the way it is right now, it would make a really sweet trailer. And I sold the last one I made, so maybe I'll make another trailer out of it. Anyway, what I'm noticing right now is I can barely get, this sits, I needed something flat, so I set it on the floor. This is a part of the roll cage, but I just set it on the floor, and I tried to make it flush with this cross member and where my floor is going to go. And I was checking my drive shaft clearance, and she's going to be super tight. So I was just thinking about the transmission tunnel, because I could put a flat sheet on this side and a flat sheet on that side, or I could do a U-shaped, like a sheet with a big notch out of the middle, so it would be like a U-shape, I guess, or V-shape. But I was just considering the transmission tunnel, because the furnace oil tank also has a nice concave bottom and top, so I could like cut a chunk of that out and lay it over the top, like a floorboard would normally be in an automotive application, or in a rear-wheel drive car. They always have a hump in the middle. What the fuck? There's water coming out of the exhaust. Water. What the frig? Out of the exhaust? What's really going on? What's really going on? Huh. Well, that's friggin' interesting. Focus, boys, focus. You wouldn't even believe the friggin' things I do. You wouldn't even believe the friggin' things I do, boys. Yep. Those are gonna be my mean looking cat eyes for the buggy. As if there's a bee. There's a friggin' bee living in there, buddy. Oh my goodness. What do you think about the Sunfire headlights? They're just sitting on there. I don't know. They seem a little bit far apart, like the eyes on Sid the Sloth. And you know that one guy from your neighborhood? Looks kind of like that. Actually, I had them closer together, and I think they look better like this, widened out. I think I had them, they're just sitting there right now. I think I had them closer in before when I was mocking them up here to see how they fit. Had them in closer like that. And I don't really like that. I like it better out here. Trying to remember now how I had them. Something like that. They're mean looking. They got those cat eye angles that everybody goes for now. That's the new thing, I guess, but yeah, they're mean looking, and they don't necessarily need to be way up there either. I suppose they could be down here. Ugh. I have to like clamp it on there because I can't hold it like that. That might be a little bit low. I got the salvage the wires and bulbs. Come on. Anyway, the headlights are in fairly good shape. And modern bulbs and modern styling. Oh my goodness, I'm sweating. She's friggin' hot out today, boys. What do you think about that? Well, I moved them down so they're not sitting up on top of the rack. They're sort of in front of the rack right now. I like them down lower. I like that better. Yeah, that's a lot better. Down lower. So I had them sitting up here. Well, just sitting on top, just because they weren't bolted on or anything. I just had them sitting there. But I think I like this better. So I clamped them to the front there just to see what it looks like. Moving them around up and down and in and out. Try to make the thing look like it's not completely cross-eyed. And yeah, I don't know. Headlights are probably the least of my worries right now, but I think these are kind of cool and modern. Okay. Can't believe there's a bee. There's a bee's nest in there. And there's a friggin' bee living inside of my buggy. I knew there was a nest in there, but it was like the nest was like a year old, and I was chopping up this whole front rack. I was chopping it up and banging on it, hammering it, welding it. And I saw the nest in there, but I thought it was like an old nest. And as far as I can tell, there's only like one bee living in it. So I don't know if he's lost or confused, or if it's a queen bee, or what the frig's going on. That's kind of weird. I moved the headlights again. I didn't move them very far. I think I moved them in a little bit and down, or tipped it down slightly. Might have to build a hood, a fiberglass, plastic, sheet metal, something or other. Yeah. Well, I'm not the type to leave. This engine's not brand new, but it's got very, very low mileage on it, and it's in really good shape. It's like brand new to me, so I would want to keep it covered up anyway. So probably need a hood, a pointy looking one, like the headlights. The camera doesn't really do it much justice. It kind of looks cool. Cooler than the camera makes it look. Alright, let's get back to the friggin' essentials. Well, the headlights aren't really that important right now. I don't even have a battery or a charging system. But they're pretty cool, and I'll probably, if I do get a battery and charging system, I'll probably use them. And might as well go back to the floor so I can finish my seats. So I'm working on another one of these recycled, reclaimed, salvaged from the side of a furnace oil tank or heating oil tank. I need more floorboards for the front. I don't really want to chop this one up here because I already got the top slab out of it, and I can make something out of that. I can use it for a tote box, or I could make another trailer box out of it, like another truck box trailer. And I might just do that since I sold the last tag-along ATV trailer I made. Sold it, so maybe I'll use this and make another one. Otherwise, it'll make a nice tote for scrap or something. And so I went and got another one. Oh man, I'm getting a bad picture here. Anyway, the front floorboards are going to be smaller, and I'm going to make two separate boards. So I'm cutting out a slab right now, 36 by 31, and that should make two separate floorboards, one for the driver's side and one for the passenger side. Each one's going to be about 18 inches by 31.